Win a Pageant, episode 52.
I created this step-by-step process after training thousands of women across the U.S. to win. Now you can have access to these winning strategies when you join me every Wednesday. Let's win a pageant.
Hey girl, welcome back to Win a Pageant podcast. I'm your coach, Alycia Darby. Now before we dive into today's episode, I would love to ask for your feedback. You know, every week I create these trainings because I really want to just impact your pageant experience. We know that pageant interview is one of the most challenging parts of pageantry, and you've just got to be really prepared and confident to really rock it, you know? So I have a few things that help out with that, but I'm also wanting to develop something that is spot on, okay? It hasn't come out yet. I'm still putting it all together and really using a lot of the feedback that I have from my VIP clients, but I would absolutely love to get your insights about what would really help you with your pageant interview. So there is a quick questionnaire which you can fill out to give some insights about what you're really needing and what you're struggling with most in your interview and things like that. If you could just take 5 minutes to fill this out for me, I will also give you my interview mini series. So it's a 4-part video series that's called How to Answer the Hardest Pageant Interview Questions. So it really breaks down how do you answer political questions, how do you answer questions that make you want to cry, you know, whether it's about your platform or about the skeletons in your closet, you know. So if you would be willing to just fill out that survey, I would love you forever. You can get the link in the show notes of this episode. That's on iTunes, or you can visit our site at winapageant.com/52. And I've also promised that everyone who fills out the survey will be moved to the front of the line for early access to the interview training that comes as a result of this. So a special thank you to those of you who have already filled it out. I super appreciate that. Thank you. So let's head into today's episode. So I want to talk with you today about how to get feedback from your judges when you compete in a pageant. And there are 2 things I want to preface this whole episode with. Very important things that are going to help us to understand this that it would be awful if I didn't talk about it. The first is that judges are real people. They're real human beings. They have life experiences. They have probably families and children. They have their own insecurities. They have their own joys. They have opinions, and they're just unique individuals, just like everybody else. So approaching a judge, asking them for feedback, things like that, should not be a scary thing, okay? Sometimes I know that pageant women do feel like embarrassed because they didn't win and they feel like odd asking for feedback right away, or sometimes they feel like they're stepping out of line asking for feedback. But I just want to assure you that when I judge pageants, I actually create a list of suggestions for each contestant in hopes that she actually cares enough to ask me for my feedback. Now, I also recognize, and I want you to recognize this as well, that judges are not gods and goddesses, okay? So just as they are real human beings and should be seen as very approachable, everything that anyone ever says, especially and including judges, should be taken with a grain of salt. So I just wanted to preface today's episode with those important notes. Now, with that said, I'm going to teach you today 2 specific ways that you can get valuable feedback from your pageant judges after the pageant. Now, these approaches have actually helped me to get feedback from judges in person immediately after the pageant. I've gotten it via email, and one that's awesome is over the phone. I've had judges call me back and connect with me to give me additional feedback. It's awesome. I've even maintained relationships with some of my former judges for ongoing help and mock interviews and things like that. So it's absolutely worth asking. Now, here's the caveat of that. Asking for feedback can open a can of worms if you do not take it with a grain of salt every single point, okay? You've just got to remember that pageantry is a subjective sport. That means that there are no cut and dry rules to winning. It's mostly based on the opinion of 5 individual strangers. Sometimes they even drop the high and the low, so you end up with a bunch of 7s and 8s to sort through, okay? Even so, if you are lucky enough to have an experienced judging panel, you may just be lucky enough to get some powerful feedback, even if you don't win. Now, when you are asking for anything, and if you've been listening to this podcast long enough, you know that we always give, and then ask. My philosophy is I always give more than you pay for. So I really, really want you to think about how can you give. Showing gratitude is a great way to do that. And there's a few ways that you can show true gratitude in order to get genuine feedback from your judges. So that's the breath that we're sort of breathing in this moment when we're asking for feedback is truly from a place of respect and gratitude. So the two ways are, first, you could simply ask, which of course is best executed in person. And the second is what I call the pen pal approach. I know that immediately after your pageant, okay, so the girl was just crowned, everyone's cheering, and the judges are, let's say, for example, the judges are brought up onto stage to have their photograph taken with the newly crowned queen. Now, I know that it is so tempting to approach a judge in that moment to ask for feedback, but don't do it. That is not the ideal time to enlist anyone's feedback, even the directors, the other girls. Nobody is in the place in that moment to give that type of feedback, okay? So you've got to be really managing this with finesse. You have to remember that many judges don't want to be put on blast. They don't want to say to you, well, yeah, I really liked you. I really connected with you, and I gave you all 10s, but I don't know how this girl won, right? Like sometimes that happens, but no matter what, immediately after the pageant is not the time to ask for feedback. The first way, the simple ask, does in fact begin immediately after the pageant, but it doesn't end there. So let's just say that you have the opportunity to show your gratitude. Remember, you're showing your gratitude during the post-pageant photos, or like in the parking lot afterward, or you pass them by in the hallway, something like that. You want to start by saying, thank you so much for taking part in our pageant. We appreciate that you were here to be a judge. Just acknowledging the fact that they went out of their way, they're not spending time with family. Sometimes judges have to be in town for several days. Remember, they're not competing for a prize package like you. So if they're volunteering their time, they deserve your gratitude first. So always lead with that. Say, hey, thanks so much. I know that you're spending time away from family and stuff, and I just really appreciate you being here to be able to make our pageant run. You might even strike up a conversation with them. So where did you travel from? Or, who else came with you this weekend? Or have you ever competed in a pageant before or judged before? You want to just strike up a conversation, get to know them again as a real human being so that you have an understanding where their feedback eventually is coming from. Now, if they're receptive to this conversation, then you could ask them right then if they might be willing to provide some candid feedback to you in the next couple of days or so that could help you in your pageant career. So I typically say it just like that. Hey, I'm planning on competing again, maybe this very pageant or another in the future. I would love to get your very candid feedback, and you don't have to share it with me right now, but would it be okay if I reached out in the next day or so to just hear your thoughts on how I did in the pageant? Now, generally, they will be so flattered and honored and jump at the opportunity to give you their entire list of ideas of how you really did, like people are like busting at the seams, ready to share what they really thought. So that's a great opportunity for them to say yes. Sometimes they will spout out a few tips right then and there. Other times they may give you an email or a phone number. I always ask, if they say yes, what is the best method for me to contact you? And when is the best time? Sometimes they will say no, and that's okay too. You want to just respect their wish to, for any reason. Maybe they feel like they didn't take enough feedback. They can't remember which girl you were. So they're like, you did really good. Like they don't really have specific feedback for you. It could be that. It could also be that the feedback that they have for you is not pleasant to share. And so if they aren't someone that can fix those things for you, then they might not want to give the feedback that you really need. I find that oftentimes with people who are not in the pageant industry, they feel like they don't know how to fix your walk. So they don't want to tell you had a terrible walk. And then what do they tell you how to fix that? You know what I mean? So that is one thing that you could encounter if they say no, that they don't want to. Sometimes the directors have asked them not to give any individual feedback, so that could come up as well. They may even say, well, I did write some notes for you, so you should be getting them from your director. Because as judges, sometimes they ask us for feedback, and then they share it anonymously so that it's not attached to a specific judge, and it just gives them general feedback. So there are many reasons that they may say no, and if that's the case, Just let them know that you still appreciate them being a part of the pageant. So when the time is right, and I like to follow up within the next couple of days while it's still fresh on their mind. If they say, oh, I'm from Kentucky and your pageant was in Maine or something, and they've got to be flying back later that day or the next day or something, give them some time, to get home and get rested or whatever. But then follow up while it's still fresh in her mind. If someone is gracious enough to give you some feedback, helpful or otherwise, it would be appropriate to follow up with additional gratitude. So especially if they write you this big long email or they spend 15 minutes with you on the phone or something like that, it is absolutely worth sending a handwritten note, even if this person has given you feedback 20 times before, okay? You always want to show gratitude and appreciation. So again, a handwritten note could be really great if you want to send them like a Starbucks coffee card, or Amazon cards are really great because you can email them straight away to someone and they can use them right away, and everybody shops on Amazon anymore, So gratitude is always valuable after you receive the feedback. Now, the second approach ends very similarly, but starts with the handwritten thank you note. So let's say that the pageant goes by and you did not get the opportunity to simply ask immediately after the pageant or really create much of a rapport at that time. Instead, you want to show your gratitude for them coming out to the pageant, taking time away from their family, spending the day indoors, fairly judging your performance, all of that in a handwritten thank you note. Now, in that note, you could mention that you plan to continue competing and that you'd be grateful if they would share any feedback that could help to improve your performance in the future. And I say it just like that. And then I give my email and phone number. When somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, Alycia, I've got a quick question, or hey, can you give me some feedback? If that's the case, I just want to call them right away. As soon as I get that message, if I'm in the zone of responding to emails or Facebook messages or whatever, flipping through my mail, I want to just knock it out right away. So I would give your email and your phone number because you would be surprised at how many people will just call you flat out right then and say, hi, I just got your note. Thanks so much for that. Here's your feedback. Okay. I also have found that many judges prefer phone because they want it to be off the record. They don't want you to ever be able to, say, oh, well, so-and-so told me they liked me better than this person or whatever. They want it to be off the record. So I always give your phone number as well, just in case they can give you a quick call. Both of these scenarios can work really, really well. I've had both of them work extremely well. I know that judges love handwritten thank you notes. I have never one time received a handwritten thank you note from any pageant contestant in all of the pageants I have judged. Never once have I received that from an actual contestant. When I've sent them for every pageant that I was able to get information from, I've always sent the judges a handwritten thank you note, and I've never once received it. And I think it's fascinating that girls don't think of this stuff. It's so valuable. The pageant industry is very small. I've had judges judge me again in the same state, different pageant systems, different states even within the same pageant system. So it's really vital to maintain your reputation in this way, and gratitude goes such a long way. Now, I know that every pageant is different. Some directors forbid you from talking to the judges altogether. Others host cocktail parties before the pageant and invite the judges. Some pageants are very stingy with the judges' information. Like, they don't want you to reach out to them. They fear that you'll be a bother to them or you will make the pageant look bad or something. Other directors welcome the thoughtfulness of contestants to send thank you notes to their judges, especially volunteer judges. So that can be really huge. After every one of my pageants, I ask the director for mailing addresses of each one of the judges. I only ask the director once in case they, for some reason, feel uncomfortable or they have a fear mindset. I don't want to, make it odd or weird or something. If they give them to me right away, that's great. If they don't, then I do my own research. It's generally pretty easy to get in contact with somebody when you've got the name of the judge, right? So look them up on Facebook or LinkedIn, things like that. There's ways to get people's information. So think for just a moment about the last time that you approached a judge for feedback. Did you make it more about them or all about you? People want to feel really good about their time, and they really want to feel respected and valued. And the more that you are respectful and gracious, the more generous and respectful the judge will be. And that, ladies, is how you win a pageant. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next Win a Pageant Wednesday. Hey there, I'm Alycia Darby, and I just want to say thank you so much for watching that last video. If you totally loved it and got something from it, would you just click subscribe right here to subscribe to our YouTube channel? Hey, I am here for you, and I've got so many more trainings and videos for you. In fact, this one would be a really great one to watch next. Or if that topic doesn't interest you, then try this one. It's my most recent video training. So I think both of these would be really great for you. Thank you again so much for subscribing. I am honored to be your coach. I'll see you again soon.